The Star Wars films are so visually dense. They're pretty much a never-ending source of stuff to observe. And because I want to observe everything, I watch these movies with an unnatural level of scrutiny. So consequently, I still have a ton of fun things that I can share. And last time I did something like this, you guys seemed to enjoy it. So here's a whole other list of mind-meltingly obscure trivia from the original Star Wars films. So A New Hope is such an interesting film because the conventions of Star Wars hadn't really been established and the technology and the budget weren't quite up to the standard of George Lucas's imagination. So we get some really interesting things, like for instance this extra in Mos Eisley, who's clearly wearing blue jeans. She kind of has her own Han Solo thing going on, which makes sense because Han Solo himself is wearing denim. We actually see her again briefly where it's very clear that this is a pair of jeans. Speaking of Han Solo, I wanted to mention this pair of headphones on the Millennium Falcon. Now, headphones are not a particularly rare sight in Star Wars, but I thought these were notable because we actually see the exact same variety of headphones literally one scene earlier. This guy's wearing an identical set under his helmet, which looks inspired by a World War II Talker helmet, so apparently Han Solo got his hands on some genuine Imperial technology. In the real world, these are Prince Sound 909 VS superior quality stereo headphones. And on the topic of appropriated Imperial technology, there's a fun little reuse of a set piece that I noticed recently, where the console that the super laser tunnel technicians are using is exactly the same console that R2 gets hooked up to when the Alliance is retrieving the Death Star plans from his memory banks. The contexts are so different that I guess we just have to assume that in universe, this is just a generic console that can be reprogrammed for very different purposes. Now, something that's really cool about A New Hope is it contains a completely unique Imperial uniform pattern that's not seen anywhere else in the entire franchise. On the Death Star, we can see quite a good number of Imperial personnel wearing a single-breasted tunic. This tunic is the typical sort of dark grayish, slightly olive color, but the collar and the cuffs notably have a significantly more olive hue. Furthermore, they all lack badges and their trousers go over their boots. It's not clear what these uniforms are really meant to be. Some kind of base personnel? I'm not sure, but it is interesting, and it would be cool to see this come back somewhere. Now, moving on to The Empire Strikes Back, I think it's really fun that we can spot both Wedge and Zev at Leia's briefing before the Battle of Hoth. They're not quite as recognizable without their helmets, and they're obscured by this guy for most of the scene, but it's definitely them. And this is more well known, but Wedge does appear a few more times without his helmet, where we see him in another briefing scene as well as at the final celebration. Now, on the topic of X-Wing pilots, there's a fun little bit where Luke is using his boarding ladder as a makeshift bridge on Dagobah. Now, where does this ladder come from, and where does it go when he takes off? Who knows? Luke also has a ton of equipment that he can apparently access from the cockpit of his X-Wing, and this equipment includes an ice cream maker. These have become common features in Star Wars ever since they were made famous by an evacuating Cloud City citizen, but it's definitely on full display here on Dagobah as well. The hangar floor lights that we see in Rebel hangars in all three films actually pop up in several places throughout The Empire Strikes Back in different contexts. We can see one on the ceiling of the Executor's command complex and on the walls of Darth Vader's personal chamber as well. It pops up in a few different places in Cloud City too, repurposed into strangely shaped control panels. One more thing in The Empire Strikes Back that I'd like to talk about is this Imperial crewman operating this data pad with a red stylus. He's pretty front and center, so this isn't exactly an obscure detail, but it's worth noting that this prop actually shows up in several places before this. Here we can see it hanging on the wall, and we can see several other crewmen using these devices. We can see one in partial close-up revealing that it has some pretty bizarre controls, which actually remind me of those PEG games more than they remind me of any type of computer interface that I know of. So I guess now it's time to hop on over to Return of the Jedi. Right out of the gate, we have something really interesting to notice, and that's the fact that we can see two A280 blasters hanging on the wall in the Death Star. And while this blaster is usually associated with the Alliance, it would seem that the Empire uses these as well, at least in some capacity. Though it's not like this would be the first time. Even in A New Hope, the Empire and the Alliance were using the same models of blaster. These blasters are simply more widespread and less factionally specific than typically assumed. And immediately after this, we get another really interesting shot. As Vader's shuttle approaches the hangar, we can see two stormtroopers doing exterior work. And these guys are definitely stormtroopers, as confirmed in a behind-the-scenes photograph. They might even have non-standard armor, but it's hard to tell. Moving right along, there's a fun costume detail that has gotten some recognition, and that's the logo on the Home One crew hats. This is, to my knowledge, a completely unique logo that hasn't appeared anywhere else in the franchise. Interestingly enough, these hats have popped up as merchandise at Disney's Galaxy's Edge, but the logo was retconned into the stereotypical Alliance logo rather than the more unique logo in the film. Oh, and another interesting costume detail, we get a nice juicy close-up of an Endor commando setting a charge in the shield bunker, and we can read on his glove what we might call high galactic text. The letters seem to spell THOM, maybe? Thomas? I'm not sure. It's hard to tell. And then we get the number 1200 followed by a sequence of letters. Again, it's hard to tell, but yet another example of so-called high galactic in the original trilogy. And here's another fun little VFX quirk. See how Wedge is flying ahead of Lando here? Well, wait, where'd Wedge go? Oh, there he is. The footage layer of Wedge's X-Wing is mistimed by a single frame, so he appears to drop out of existence for 1/24th of a second. And in this scene, there's another fun thing to notice, which is 2 interceptors fly into the reactor chamber, but only one comes out, yet there's very little fire exchanged. So what happened to the other guy? Well, it looks like he just took the turn a bit too sharp and got caught in whatever this energy stuff is. Anyway, so that's another little collection of fun things that I've noticed and learned from watching the original Star Wars films. And I hope that there was some new stuff in there that can enrich future viewings of these films for you. And if you guys continue to enjoy videos like this, I would love to keep making them. I'm sure I could do at least one on the prequels as well. So if that's something that you would like to see, let me know. Thank you all so much for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.